The scent of orange blossoms clung to the folds of my veil as the caravan rolled into Marrakesh under the silvery hush of night. My name was Layla, and tonight I arrived not as a girl, but as a bride, veiled in silk, bound by fate, and burdened with a heart full of questions. I remember how the stars above the desert had seemed to follow me, like silent witnesses to the steps I was forced to take. The sand beneath the hooves of our camels whispered ancient lullabies, and even a breeze felt as if it carried secrets, some of which, I suspected, were my own. They said Marrakesh was a city of color and heat, of spice and secret longing, of palaces veiled behind mosaic walls. But I saw none of it that first night. The thick curtains of the bridal litter blocked the world outside. I only glimpsed candlelit silhouettes, a minaret rising like a watchful sentinel, the domed rooftops glowing in moonlight, and lanterns swinging gently in alleyways like fireflies that had forgotten how to sleep. My hands trembled inside the gold-threaded gloves that covered them. Every bangle clinked like a soft warning, and my ankle bells chimed with every movement, betraying the rhythm of my nerves. My mother had arranged a union. My father had blessed it. And now I was here, promised to a man I had never touched, in a palace I had never seen, wrapped in silks chosen by women who would never ask what I wanted. And yet, as the litter was lowered, and I stepped onto a velvet carpet that led into the harem courtyard, I felt something strange. Warmth. The kind of warmth that does not come from candlelight or summer air. It came from the way his eyes found mine across the pool of rose water. He stood on the far side of the courtyard, his robes dark as night, his shoulders broad beneath soft indigo linen. A hooded jalaba draped over him, but the light from the lanterns caught on his face, revealing lips that curled gently, not in a smirk, but something softer, a recognition, a hush. He was younger than I imagined, not a sultan, but a prince, not old nor cruel, not distant, but watching me as if he already knew something about me no one else did. "Welcome, my desert rose," he said, bowing low. His voice was rich, dusted with accent, and it rolled through the air like oud smoke in a bathhouse. My throat tightened. I tried to answer, but all I managed was a nod. Even that felt dangerous, like surrendering to something already unfolding. The other women, my handmaidens and the palace servants, began to hum a song I didn't recognize. It was slow, sensual, and threaded with old meanings. A song meant not for guests, but for nights of closeness. I was led through an archway into a private chamber lit by amber lanterns and flickering oil lamps. Drapes of deep red and gold flowed from the ceiling like desert dunes turned to silk. Pillows the color of saffron and garnet spilled across the floor, and rose petals floated in a shallow marble basin at the room's heart. The scent was dizzying, jasmine, sandalwood, cardamom, and the faintest trail of incense. It was a room made not just for rest, but for intimacy. When I turned to face him, he was already inside. He had removed the hood, letting thick waves of dark hair fall around his face. His eyes, the color of brewed tea kissed by honey, locked with mine. "I asked for you not to be prepared as others are," he said gently. "I wanted to see the woman beneath the veil, not the bride painted for a stranger's pleasure." The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than anything else had that day. I was prepared for indifference. I was prepared for lust. But I was not prepared for kindness. He stepped closer. "I know you must be afraid. I would be too. But this night is not something I will take from you. I want it to unfold like a dance, if you wish to dance." His fingers reached for my veil, but paused, waiting for my nod. I gave it. The fabric fell slowly, slipping from my brow like a whispered promise. My hair tumbled out, oiled, combed, adorned with desert pearls. His gaze didn't linger on any one part of me. It roamed reverently, not like a man claiming property, but like one admiring poetry. He offered his hand. I placed mine in it, and so began the first night. We did not rush. The palace was silent beyond these walls. Even the desert wind outside had quieted. We sat near the open balcony, beneath a stretch of star-filled sky. He poured sweet mint tea for us both, his fingers brushing mine with every exchange. The warmth of the tea barely matched the heat blooming beneath my skin. We spoke in half-sentences, in pauses, in looks that said more than any language could hold. He asked me about my favorite flowers. I told him about the scent of rain on desert sand. He told me about books he loved. I confessed my fear of losing myself. He leaned in. "You do not need to disappear to become someone's wife," he said. "I want the fire in you, not just the softness." And just like that, something broke inside me, some wall built over years of silence. He traced a line down my arm, not in hunger, but in reverence. His lips found the inside of my wrist, then my cheek, then lower, but always waiting for my breath, my answer, my sigh. Our first kiss did not feel like an act. It felt like an unfolding, something that had been waiting in both of us, hidden like spring beneath sandstorms. He kissed me slowly, deeply, holding the nape of my neck as if I were fragile porcelain. And I melted, one heartbeat at a time. That night, we did not become strangers bound by duty. We became lovers cradled by moonlight, wrapped in silk, kissed by the desert's hush. And the stories of that night, they would be whispered across Marrakesh, not in words, but in jasmine blooms and flickering oil lamps. Tales told without sound, but full of warmth. Tales of the bride who arrived beneath the moon, and the prince who touched her soul before her skin. The tent was not a mere shelter. It was a sanctuary woven with silk, lined in rose-colored velvet, and scented with the whisper of orange blossoms. Every corner flickered with oil lamps tucked into brass holders shaped like flowers blooming under fire. I stepped inside slowly, the weight of my wedding robes trailing behind me like the last breath of a storm. He was already there, seated on a low cushion, head bowed, his profile framed by a lattice screen, glowing with lamplight. I had only seen glimpses of him before, shadows cast behind carved wooden panels, reflections in still courtyard water. But now he was real, no longer amid the women whispered about. The husband, my husband, he stood as I entered. His robes were dark in the sky, a deep indigo brush with gold thread, wrapped loosely around a body that moved like wind over dunes, silent, smooth, and sure. A sheer scar veiled the lower half of his face, but his eyes were a story I could feel on my skin. Neither of us spoke at first. There was no need. The stillness between us shimmered like heat on stone. The soft hush of fabric brushing fabric, as I sat down beside him, was louder than words. He poured tea with slow care, every movement deliberate, his fingers precise. The steam curled between us like a question. I took the cup and held it, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "I did not think you'd come willingly," he said finally, his voice velvet, deep, low, and slightly amused. I tilted my head. "You never gave me reason to fear you." He reached for his own cup. That was intentional. His eyes lingered on me with a quiet hunger, not rushed or greedy, but patient, as if he were reading every breath I took, every shift in my shoulders, every blink. "I heard you paint," he said, softer now, "that your father once paid a scribe to copy poems just so you could draw the images between the lines." I stared at him. No one outside my old garden had known that. I asked about you, he said, long before tonight. Silence wrapped around us again, but it was warmer now, familiar. I looked down at the henna blooming along my fingers, curling like vines around my wrists. My skin remembered his voice, the rhythm of it. It made my chest rise slowly, made my breast stretch out like silk over sand. He reached out and, without touching me, traced a line above the edge of my scarf. You're not what I expected. And what did you expect? A lamb, he murmured. You are not a lamb. I smiled then, not shy, but slow and deliberate. And you're not a wolf. He laughed. It was quiet, but full of something I couldn't yet name. Something dangerous, yes, but kind. The sort of danger that makes your pulse quicken, but never flee. He stood and walked to a wide cushion where two carved oud instruments rested. One was smaller, worn at the neck, clearly used more often. He picked up the other, tuning it with practiced hands. The melody began slow, like a hush just before a secret. My heart moved to the rhythm without permission. He sang, not loudly, but close to the firelight, his voice laced with something older than the room, older than us. And when he stopped, there was only breath. Mine, his. Will you dance? He asked. I blinked. Now. Yes. I haven't danced since I was a girl. He extended a hand, palm open, not pulling, only offering. So I rose, the silk side around my ankles. I moved not because I knew the steps, but because something in the music filled my spine. He did not touch me, not yet, but he circled, moving with me, eyes fixed on my center like I was gravity. We didn't dance as bride and groom. We danced as two shadows stitched together by lantern light. Eventually, my laughter escaped, light and sudden. He caught with a smile and took a step closer. Are you truly mine now? He asked, close enough for the words to brush my cheek. I answered without speaking. I touched his hand, finally, not shy, not slow, just sure. Our fingers linked and stayed. And it was that simple. No vow, no kiss, no script written by other hands. The lamps burned lower. The centimer curled into the silk. And still we moved, softer now, slower, as though the desert itself was listening, as though the moon wanted its own story to hear. The moon had climbed higher, a silver crown in the ink-dark sky above Marrakesh. Inside the bridal pavilion, where time seemed to melt beneath silken shadows, I felt the air grow warmer, not from the desert wind, but from something far more delicate and near, his presence. The man I had been promised to, this veiled stranger whose voice had become a song in the quiet, sat beside me now with a patience that stirred me more than words ever could. He poured another cup of tea, his fingers brushing the rim of my glass with a reverence that made my breath catch. We spoke little, but the silence between us was no longer hollow. It was thick with possibility. Every glance he gave me felt like an invitation to drift closer, to let the veil between us slip. I dared to glance at him as I lifted my tea. He was watching me again, eyes dark and steady, full of ancient emotion. The way he held his cup, the curve of his fingers, the slow rise of steam between us. It all became a quiet ritual of seduction. There was no need for touch. Not yet. Desire bloomed like the slow unfolding of a night-blooming jasmine, unhurried, graceful, potent. The tent was quiet, but not still. The silk curtains moved with the breeze, sighing gently. Somewhere, the low beat of a hand drum echoed from a courtyard far away. It was as though the city itself hummed in approval of our silent unfolding. He reached toward a small copper tray and lifted a piece of dried fig, offering it to me without words. I leaned forward, the edge of my veil falling slightly, and took the fig from his fingers with my lips. His breath hitched, just barely, and I felt that subtle shift in the air between us again. He was no longer a stranger. He was a flame drawing me toward him. With each moment, The veil between us, physical and otherwise, grew thinner. He asked me what I dreamed of. I paused, heart pounding at the intimacy of such a question. In my world, dreams were luxuries left unspoken. But tonight, under silken stars, I allowed the truth to slip from my lips. I dream of being seen, I whispered. Truly seen, not through duty but through desire. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted his hand and slowly drew the edge of my veil upward, just enough to see the curve of my cheek, the shape of my mouth. The air between us went still. I see you, he said. Those 3 words sank into me like warm desert sand. Slow, soft, consuming. I let the veil fall away from my face entirely then. I wanted him to see every inch of me the moon dared illuminate. My skin flushed under his gaze, but not from shame, from the thrill of being chosen, not just claimed. He leaned in, but not to kiss me. No, his lips brushed the edge of my ear, and he whispered, "You are more than I imagined." His voice was a feather, a promise, a thread tying us together. We spoke no more that night. Words were unnecessary when 2 souls began to orbit each other like stars circling gravity. He played the oud again, the notes softer this time, as though he was no longer performing for a guest, but playing for a woman he longed to know. I curled beside him, the length of my embroidered robe pulling around us, our shoulders barely touching. It was enough to send sparks across my skin. In this quiet, in this dark, I felt myself becoming wife, yes, but also muse, mystery, fire. And as the hours melted like sugar on the tongue, I knew the night had only just begun. I awoke to the scent of crushed orange blossoms and incense drifting through the curtains, stirring slowly beneath a linen canopy kissed with the gold of morning. My body still tingled from the memory of his touch the night before, how his fingers had gently traced the henna patterns on my hands, as if memorizing a story written just for him. He was already awake, seated cross-legged at the low mosaic table, bare-chested beneath his robe. The light caressed the edge of his jaw and neck. There was something effortless about him in the daylight, something quietly commanding. He looked up and smiled when he saw me rise, his eyes still clouded with dreams, or perhaps desire. "Sleep finds you gently," he murmured, motioning for me to join him. I did, draped in a silk shawl the color of pomegranates, and he poured tea with practiced grace. The glass in my hand trembled slightly as he brushed my wrist, and I wondered if he noticed how easily he could unravel me with nothing more than a glance. We spoke little that morning. Our eyes said more than our mouths could. There was an ease between us, but also a tension humming beneath it, like a secret waiting to be revealed. Later, he led me through the gardens beyond the riad, where apricot trees bent low with fruit and water trickled from marble fountains. He spoke of poetry and politics, of love as rebellion, and desire as sanctuary. His voice was softer when he spoke of his mother, a desert singer who had died young, leaving behind only lullabies and one sapphire earring he still carried in a velvet pouch. I found myself opening too. The more he revealed, the more I dissolved. I told him my childhood under a merchant's shadow, of the smell of dates ripening in the sun, of long nights dreaming of a world beyond expectations. I spoke of loneliness, the kind only a woman knows when she's seen, but not touched, wanted but not known. He didn't interrupt. He only listened, truly listened, with his whole body. When I finished, he stepped closer, gently brushing my cheek with the backs of his fingers. "You are not invisible here," he said. Not to me. That evening, our bodies found each other again, not hurriedly, but slowly, as though the hours had softened the hunger. He undressed me beneath the flicker of lanterns, reverently peeling away the layers of silken time. My breath caught as he kissed a small scar on my collarbone, then trailed his lips lower, down the valley of my ribs, to the secret places where language dissolved. Every gesture was a sentence, every sigh punctuation. We made love as though we were painting something sacred on parchment skin. Later, as we lay tangled in one another beneath the open dome of the night, he told me that love in the desert was not unlike water, rare, precious, and always moving. But what if it dries up? I whispered. Then we dig deeper, he said, pressing a kiss into the hollow of my throat. Outside, the wind began to rise, sending whispers through the palms. I nestled into the crook of his arm, and for the first time in my life, I didn't dream of escape. I dreamed only of staying. But I sensed something lingering on his breath that night, a truth not yet spoken, a tide beginning to turn. And though I was wrapped in warmth, a sliver of chill threaded its way into my heart. Still I said nothing. Not yet. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, and with it, the crowded murmur of Marrakesh's souks faded into silence. In its place came the hush of night, and the song of wind moving over the dunes like a whisper from the ancient past. Within the walls of our riad, the world was a different rhythm, one of soft fabric, firelight, and skin. Tonight, I stood by the courtyard's small fountain, dipping my fingers into its cool water. The marble beneath me was warm from the heat of the day, and the air carried the scent of rose petals and dry earth. I was wrapped in the sheerest muslin robe, pale ivory, nearly weightless. My hair, still damp from bathing, clung to my back in long, curling tendrils. I had lit the lanterns myself, every one. Dozens of flames flickering in amber glass casings made the courtyard look like a secret temple where only longing was worshipped. He came in without a sound, the way he always did. I didn't turn, but I felt his presence behind me, like heat on bare skin before fire touches it. He said nothing at first. He simply slipped behind me, pressing his chest on my back, his arms wrapping slowly, deliberately around my waist. "You smell like jasmine," he murmured, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. I closed my eyes, letting my head fall back against his shoulder. "And you smell like firewood and dust in the sea," I whispered. He turned me gently, and for a moment we just stood, looking at one another, the kind of gaze that doesn't ask permission or questions. It only says, "I see you, and you are mine." His fingers moved up to trace the hollow of my throat, and I felt my pulse responding before my mind could catch up. "I want to take you somewhere," he said softly. "Where?" "To a place where the city cannot find us, where no one wears masks, not even you." His words stirred something inside me, something buried so deeply I had nearly forgotten it existed. I didn't ask further. I simply nodded. We left the riad before the call to the final prayer. The streets were nearly empty, the moon a pale guardian above, casting silver threads along the alleyways. We walked through back roads, through a narrow gate hidden behind hanging palms, then past old walls carved with forgotten Berber symbols, until the city's stones gave way to sand. He had prepared everything. A horse waited by the edge of the dunes, dark and tall, saddled not with armor, but with embroidered silk. He helped me mount, and then swung up behind me, wrapping his arms around me as the animal began its slow, rhythmic journey. We rode under the stars. The wind tangled my hair with his. His breath kissed the back of my neck. The motion of the horse beneath us lulled me into a trance, a slow dance of silence, heat, and the promise of something ancient. After what felt like a dream stretched across hours, we arrived at a secluded oasis, nestled among rocks and fig trees, hidden from the world. A small tent had been erected there, not one of canvas or camel hide, but of midnight blue velvet, stitched with silver thread, like a palace for a desert queen. Inside it was everything and nothing, cushions in every shade of moonlight, lanterns with color glass, a bowl of figs, a pitcher of cool honey wine, and in the center a large bed, pillows strewn across a low platform, and silk sheets the color of desert sand. He undressed me slowly, as if each tie, each clasp, each slip of fabric was a vow not yet spoken. I undressed him too, savoring the way his muscles moved under my fingers, the way his breath hitched when I kissed the hollow beneath his ribs. We laid down not just our robes, but our history. We whispered every secret we had once locked behind our tongues. I told him how I feared the night as a child, how I'd once hidden in a clay oven to escape the screams of soldiers. He told me of a mother who sang to the moon when his father was away at war, of how he learned to fear the silence more than the noise. And then, only then did we make love, not like strangers pretending to know each other, not like lovers playing a game, but like two people remembering something their bodies had known long before their minds had caught up. His touch was not hurried. It was reverent. Every kiss to my collarbone, every breath against my thigh, every whispered word in the language of lovers long dead. It felt like poetry not written with ink, but with skin and breath and sweat. Our bodies moved together in a slow, sensuous rhythm, like the ocean carving shapes into sand. He made me feel like I was not a bride bought or gifted, but a woman chosen, cherished, and claimed under a sky so full of stars it made the heart ache. Later, when our breathing had softened and we lay tangled in sweat-slick sheets, he held me like he was afraid I would vanish. He buried his face in my hair and whispered, "You're not just a desert bride. You're my story, told in fire and flesh." I didn't speak. I only pressed my lips to his pulse and let the silence hold us. And somewhere outside, a jackal howled, a cry not of danger, but of mourning, because something in me had died that night, the version of me that thought I could love without losing something, without surrendering a piece I could never take back. The courtyard was quiet again. The laughter from the feast had long since faded into memory, leaving behind only the hush of palm leaves brushing in the breeze and the hum of a distant flute, soft as a whisper. I sat near the edge of the moon pool, my ankles dipped in the cool water, the silk of my robe clinging to my legs like a second skin. I felt warm, yet weightless, like a dream balancing on the edge of waking. Tonight, something had shifted. Yusef had changed too. I saw it in his eyes earlier, as he watched me beneath the lanterns. It was more than hunger. It was longing, dangerous, reverent, something sacred and ancient. I had never been desired like that, not just as a bride or as a woman, but as if I were a star that had fallen just for him. After a while, he emerged from the shadows in silence, barefoot across the patterned tiles, a candlelit halo framing his face. He extended a hand without a word, and I rose. The silence between us was thick, Humming like a drumbeat neither of us dared interrupt. He led me down a path I had never taken before, through carved stone archways, down narrow passageways lined with jasmine vines, deeper into the heart of the palace than I had ever wandered. I clung to his hand like a child drawn into a secret, heart racing with each step. At last, we came to a pair of brass doors. He paused and looked down at me, the flickering flame of his lantern dancing in his eyes. "This place is hidden from the rest," he murmured. "It's where only a true bride of fire may enter." I didn't speak. I simply watched as he pressed the doors open. Inside was not a room but a walled garden, unlike anything I had imagined. It was overgrown yet sacred, wild yet tended by unseen hands. Ancient fruit trees stretched their arms toward the moon above, and in the center, surrounded by a ring of polished stones, was a sacred fire burning low and blue, a whisper of heat rather than a blaze. The scent was overwhelming, amber, sandalwood, myrrh, interwoven with the deep perfume of blossoms I couldn't name. "This is the garden of ash and flame," Yusuf said, his voice reverent. "It is older than this palace. Some say older than Marrakesh itself. Only a bride who surrenders her fears may step into the circle and not be burned. And if she is not ready," I asked, "then the flame will not rise. But you," he added softly, "you are ready." I stepped forward slowly, drawn not by bravery, but by something older, deeper, something that had been calling me since the night I first wore the veil. When I reached the edge of the ring, I felt the heat lick at my skin, not scalding, but arousing like breath against the inside of my wrist. I removed my slippers, then my scarf, then, slowly, the silk that covered my shoulders. Yusuf watched with awe, no greed in his gaze. Only a man watching a goddess awaken. I stepped into the circle. The fire did not recoil. It rose. A shimmer of blue-gold flame wrapped around my ankles, not touching me, but dancing with me, tracing my form like a lover's hands. My skin glowed in its light. I felt it pulse through me, not pain, but a baptism of heat and wanting. Yusuf stepped in after me, and there, beneath the stars, the sacred fire between us, we began a dance older than words. No music, only breath and pulse and sighs. His robe slid from his shoulders like water, and the light touched every scar, every shadow of him. He wrapped his arms around me, and our lips met, not like the first kiss, but like the kind that undoes time itself. A kiss where breath is stolen and freely given again. I melted against him, the fire circling, rising around us, never burning, always beckoning. Our bodies moved as though guided by the memory of every desert night before us. Brides and warriors, queens and slaves, lovers hidden in the folds of time. I felt claimed, not possessed, cherished, not owned. He lay me down gently in the circle of heat, and the garden blurred around us, a haze of silver and shadow. The trees seemed to lean in, and even the stars held their breath. I gave myself to him that night, not as a duty, but as a gift I had hidden even from myself. In his arms, I was not just a bride. I was flame. I was the desert. I was every story ever told in a sigh beneath a silken canopy. And in the moment when the fire crowned around us, pulsing with light, I heard something ancient in the wind, a vow unspoken but understood, that no matter what was to come, he would burn with me, not beside me, that our story would be written not in ink, but in ash, in smoke, in the glow that never fades when night falls. The days passed, or perhaps they melted into one another like rose petals in hot water. I could not tell. Time, once measured by the sun's arc and the servant's calls of prayer, had become something else. Pliable, fragrant, ungoverned. I lived now for the moonlight and for him. Each night, just after the lamps were trimmed and silence settled upon the stone floors of the villa, he would come, never through the door, always through some forgotten arch, or climbing over the low garden wall with the ease of wind passing through silk. He wore no shoes when he came to me. His feet were silent upon the mosaics. His breath always held until he reached me. I would feel it first, his presence, like a change in the air's rhythm, a shift in the hush of night. And then his hands, strong and sun-darkened, would find my skin beneath the embroidered sheets. The chamber was no longer just a room. It was a shrine. Candles lit by his fingertips glowed in copper bowls. Their wax melted slowly like honey, their flames low and flickering, always careful not to outshine the moon. My walls had become mirrors of our bodies, silhouettes writhing, blooming, dissolving like incense. We spoke little. Words could not survive the heat between us. What passed for language was far more ancient. A shared look, the pause of a breath, the bite of a lip. When I closed my eyes beneath him, I saw desert stars in his hands holding them. And when I opened them, he was always there, watching me like one beholds fire, with awe and fear and devotion. One night, he brought with him a bottle, tiny, glass, so dark it looked like obsidian. He uncorked it and pressed a single drop onto my tongue. It tasted of figs and smoke, of 1,000 gardens. My skin became flushed with warmth, my bones humming. He lifted me, slowly, reverently, as if I were a sacred object not meant to be owned, only worshipped. And he did, my ankles upon his shoulders, his mouth tracing the valley between my breasts, the hollow of my belly, the softest skin where no one else had dared to go. I arched beneath him, my fingers threading into his hair as if to anchor myself. I feared that if I let go, I would drift into the stars themselves. He called me things in his language I did not understand, soft, secret things whispered against my skin. I knew they were names not meant for wives or queens, but for goddesses, for fire spirits, for women who waited centuries for a single touch. And I responded not with words, but with the language of motion, the roll of my hips, the tremble of my thighs, the sighs that escaped even as I tried to silence them beneath trembling palms. That night, he took me in the shadow of the window, where the moonlight could pour over us like water, my back arched against cool stone, his body pressed firm and slow and deep within me. The veil between flesh and soul thinned until I no longer knew where he ended and I began. After, he carried me to the bed like a new bride. We lay there, tangled in silk and sweat, not speaking. His fingers brushed lazy circles across my hips, as if sketching memories he feared would fade. And I, with my head upon his chest, listened to the thunder of his heart, like it was the rhythm of a distant drum guiding a caravan through the dunes. But even in that stillness, a question began to bloom. Was I dreaming, or was I the dream? Because when morning came, he was always gone. The sheets would be smooth, the candles blown out, the senim faded into the folds of my robe. No servant saw him. No guard ever questioned his presence. Yet my body remembered deeply. Every muscle stretched an echo of him, every breath still shallow from the touch of his name across my throat. And then came the whisper, an old one. "You are not the first," it said, "and you will not be the last." I heard it one morning in the water bowl as I washed my face. I saw it written in the mist on the glass of my chamber mirror. The desert keeps secrets the way a lover keeps kisses. Deep and never enough. But I did not fear it. I welcomed it, because in some strange way, I wanted to be a part of the legend. The woman who vanished each morning with bruised lips and scented thighs. The desert bride whose body burned like frankincense when touched by a man born of heat and mystery. In his arms, I had become not just a woman, but a myth. And I would not trade that for any crown. The moon had retreated behind the mountains, and the first threads of dawn spilled across the Marrakesh sky, like strands of golden silk. I stirred from slumber in the thick hush of early morning. My limbs were draped in the warmth of the sheets, tangled with the lingering scent of saffron, musk, and something uniquely his. But the space beside me had gone cold. He was gone. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting to see a silhouette outline in that soft, faded blue of morning. The curtains danced gently in the breeze, trailing ghost-like across the tile floor. Only silence met me. He had vanished with the night. A bitter ache spread through my chest, yet I could not cry. My fingers sought the pillow where his head had rested, still warm, barely. A kiss from the memory of him brushed my soul, and I pulled the robe from the foot of the bed around me like a shroud. I walked barefoot across the mosaic floor, the chill of stone grounding me in the strangeness of waking. In the mirror, I caught my reflection, hair tousled, eyes still glazed from dreams, lips swollen from kisses. I looked like someone who had stepped out of another life, and maybe I had. There, beside my brush and perfume vial, lay the bottle, the tiny obsidian flask he had brought. I lifted it and cradled it between my palms, its weight more emotional than physical. The last of the golden elixir shimmered faintly inside. What had he said? To remember me when the night forgets. I uncorked it and let a single drop touch my tongue. The warmth spread slowly, like honey over the soul. It didn't burn this time. It comforted. And then I remembered, not just the night before, but others. Every visit, every moment, every time he had come and vanished. A mirage in flesh, a lover stitched from dream and myth. Had he ever truly belonged to the world of waking? A knock at the door stirred me. Soft, cautious. I opened it to find Layla, my servant girl, clutching a bundle of fresh linens. Her eyes met mine, wide and uncertain. "Was someone here last night?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. I looked past her to the sun, now beginning to stretch across the courtyard. The jasmine vines curled around the columns, untouched. The footprints in the dust outside my balcony had already been swept away by morning wind. "No," I answered quietly, touching her cheek. It was only a dream. But even as I said it, I knew it was more than that. That day passed in slow motion. I moved through the villa like a shadow of myself, my body sore with the memory of him, my heart aching in a strangely beautiful way. I sat by the fountain where once he had waited with eyes like starlight. I traced the lip of the marble with my fingertips. Even the breeze seemed to whisper his name. In the days that followed, I wrote down everything, every touch, every kiss, every secret exchanged in breathless silence. I sealed them in letters, unsent, unread, but sacred, tucked them in a hollow beneath the floorboards where my wedding dowry once rested. He became my secret religion, my private myth, a god I worshiped with longing. Weeks passed, perhaps months. The sky shifted from summer's bronze to autumn's honeyed rust. I wore veils again in public, painted my lips in ceremonial crimson, and took tea with noble women who whispered of politics and trade. But inside, I carried the desert night like a sacred flame. Then, one morning before dawn, a servant brought me a parcel wrapped in silk the color of twilight. Inside, a folded letter and a fresh obsidian bottle. My breath caught. The letter was written in his hand. The same ink, the same curves I had once traced on his chest with my fingers. I return when the moon wanes and the world forgets how to watch. Until then, my beloved, drink and dream of me. My hands trembled. I touched the bottle to my lips. Another drop. That night, as the villa fell quiet and the city hummed beneath star-cloaked skies, I lay once more on my silken bed, veiled, perfumed, waiting. And as the wind whispered through the arches, I felt it, his presence, near, real, flesh and breath. He came again, not as a ghost, not as a dream, but as the same man who had held my heart beneath the lantern-lit palm so long ago. Time folded like silk between us, and I knew that he was mine, always had been,